The Flicker in the Frame, Chapter 1. My granddaughter Lily vanished on a Tuesday. One moment, she was playing in the park, her bright pink backpack a splash of color against the green grass. The next, she was gone. Just 6 years old, with pigtails that bounced when she laughed and a gap-toothed smile that could melt glaciers. It's been 5 years now, but the ache in my chest is as raw as if it happened yesterday. They say time heals, but some wounds just burrow deeper, becoming a part of you, like another organ you didn't ask for but can't live without. I'm Eleanor, 62 years old, retired teacher, and a grandmother haunted by a ghost. Not a spectral figure, but the ghost of a little girl's laughter, the echo of her footsteps on my wooden floors, the phantom weight of her small hand in mine. Lily wasn't just my granddaughter. She was the light of my life, the splash of joy in my quiet routine since my husband passed. My daughter Sophie and her husband Mark were devastated, of course. We all were. The police searched, the town rallied, posters went up, news vans camped outside. But nothing, no trace, just the chilling, soul-crushing emptiness where a vibrant little girl used to be. The initial frantic energy of the search faded, replaced by a heavy, suffocating grief. Sophie and Mark struggled immensely. Their marriage buckled under the strain, the blame unspoken but palpable. Eventually, they separated, unable to face each other across the chasm of their shared loss. My son-in-law Mark moved away, unable to bear the memories etched into every street corner, every park bench. Sophie stayed, but she was a shadow of herself, her eyes vacant, her spirit broken. It felt like I had lost not only Lily, but also the vibrant daughter I once knew, and the family unit that was the center of my world. I tried to be strong for Sophie, but my own grief was a lead weight in my stomach. The house felt too big, too quiet. Every object seemed to scream her absence. The untouched teacup she used, the half-finished drawing on the fridge, the little pair of muddy boots by the door. I couldn't bear to pack anything away. Her room remained exactly as she left it, a heartbreakingly still monument to a life cut short. I spent my days in a haze of sorrow, looking through photos, running my fingers over her toys. The digital age meant I had thousands of pictures and videos of Lily stored on my computer and phone. Birthdays, holidays, everyday moments, captured forever in pixels. I'd scroll through them for hours, a bittersweet torture, clinging to the visual proof of her existence, her happiness, her infectious energy. One rainy afternoon, feeling particularly lost, I was scrolling through an old external hard drive where I backed up years of family photos and videos. Files from when Lily was a baby, a toddler, up to just weeks before she disappeared. It was painful, but also a comfort, a way to feel close to her. I clicked on a folder labeled Summer 2020, the summer she disappeared. There were videos of her playing in the sprinkler, eating ice cream, drawing pictures. And then, a file I didn't remember. The short video clip, only a few seconds long, taken on my old digital camera. It was shaky, clearly unplanned. It looked like I had accidentally hit the record button while fumbling with the camera. The video was mostly blurry, pointed towards the ground at first. Then it swung up, briefly capturing a corner of the park. Lily was visible for a split second, laughing, running. But just behind her, in the background, a figure. A woman, tall, with dark hair, wearing a long, dark coat. She was standing near the edge of the park, looking towards Lily. Her face was unclear, mostly obscured by shadow and the low resolution of the video. The clip ended abruptly. I watched it again and again. The woman was just a fleeting presence in the background, easily missed. But something about her felt significant, eerie. She was just standing there, watching. It could have been anyone, a parent, a passerby. But the way she was positioned, slightly hidden by a tree, and her stillness sent a shh in my spine. I had given the police everything, all my photos, all my videos. Had I given them this clip? I couldn't remember. In the chaos and despair of the first few days, everything was a blur. I probably just copied entire folders without reviewing each file. This little accidental video might have been lost in the shuffle. I zoomed in on the grainy image of the woman. It was impossible to make out her features. But the dark coat, the height, did I recognize her? The face remained stubbornly unidentifiable. Could this be a clue? A person of interest? Or was I grasping at straws? My grief-addled mind searching for meaning in a random flicker of pixels. I knew I had to take it to the police. Even after all this time, even if it amounted to nothing, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling the video gave me. I carefully copied the clip onto a USB drive. The next morning, I went to the police station. Chapter 2. Detective Ramirez had been the lead investigator on Lily's case. A kind, weary man with tired eyes who had treated our family with respect and compassion, but ultimately couldn't find her. He seemed surprised to see me, but welcomed me into his office. I explained about finding the accidental video clip. As he watched the few blurry seconds, his expression remained neutral. "It's hard to see much, Eleanor," he said, pausing the video on the frame with the woman. "Could be anyone. We had a lot of people in the park that day." "I know, Detective," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "but something about her, the way she was standing there, and I don't remember seeing anyone like that." He zoomed in further, the image pixelating badly. "No clear features," he sighed. "No distinguishing marks. Clothing is too generic. No vehicle visible. It's not much to go on, I'm afraid." "But could you look into it? Just in case?" I pleaded. "Could you compare it to any records? Any witnesses who mentioned seeing someone matching this description?" He looked at me with sympathy. "Eleanor, we interviewed everyone who was in the park that day. Cross-referenced descriptions. We followed up on every lead, every potential sighting. We went over every piece of evidence multiple times." He gestured to a file cabinet overflowing with folders. "Lily's case is one of the most extensive investigations this department has ever conducted." "I know you did, Detective," I said, feeling the familiar sting of despair. "But this video, I just found it. Maybe you didn't see it before." He checked the records of the evidence I had submitted initially. "Ah, yes," he said, finding the entry. "Looks like this particular video file was included in the summer 2020 videos folder you provided. It was reviewed, but without any clear identification of the person, it wasn't flagged as significant at the time." My heart sank. It had been there all along. Reviewed, but dismissed. Another dead end. "I'm sorry, Eleanor," he said gently. "I know this is incredibly difficult. We haven't forgotten Lily. Her case is still open. But without new, concrete evidence, there's not much more we can do." I left the station, feeling defeated. The faint flicker of hope extinguished. The video, the one thing that had felt like a potential lead, was just another forgotten piece of data in a mountain of unanswered questions. The weeks that followed were particularly bleak. The autumn leaves fell, mirroring my own descent into despair. Sophie was lost in her own world of grief, and I didn't know how to reach her. We were two ships passing in the night, connected by loss, but unable to navigate the storm together. I returned to my digital archives, finding a perverse comfort in the pain they inflicted. Scrolling through photos, I saw Lily's face in countless settings, at school, at birthday parties, on family vacations. Each image was a stab to the heart, a reminder of what was lost. One evening, while looking at photos from a trip we took to the coast a year before she disappeared, I noticed something in the background of one picture. Lily was building a sandcastle, completely absorbed. Behind her, walking along the boardwalk, was a woman. The image was clearer than the park video, taken with my newer phone camera. As she got closer to the edge of the frame, her face was momentarily visible. My breath hitched. There was something familiar about her. Dark hair, a certain way she carried herself. I zoomed in, straining to see. Her face was obscured by sunglasses, but the shape of her face, the angle of her jaw, it sparked a flicker of recognition, like a half-forgotten dream. Who was she? Had I seen her before? Was she just a tourist? Or was there a connection? I went back to the park video. I compared the two images side by side on my computer screen. The quality differences made it difficult, but the height, the build, the dark hair, there was a striking resemblance. Could it be the same woman? The feeling of unease returned, stronger this time. What if this woman had been in our lives before, just on the periphery? What if she wasn't a stranger in the park, but someone who had been watching, planning? I started going through all my digital photos and videos, frame by frame, scanning the backgrounds for any sign of this woman. It was a tedious, emotionally draining task, but I felt a desperate urgency, like I was on the verge of uncovering something vital. I found her again in another photo, taken at a local street fair 6 months before Lily disappeared. Again, in the background, a fleeting glimpse, always just on the edge of the frame, never looking directly at the camera, often partially obscured. It was like she was deliberately avoiding being fully captured. This wasn't a coincidence. This woman was appearing in places we were, places Lily was. She was watching. My hands trembled as I compiled the images. 3 separate instances, months apart, in different locations, but always this same woman in the background, observing Lily. It was terrifying, and it gave me a renewed sense of purpose. I went back to Detective Ramirez, armed with my new findings. He listened patiently, examining the photos I had compiled. "It's still not a clear identification, Eleanor," he said, looking at the collection of blurry figures. "The quality varies, and it could be different women with similar appearances." "But the pattern, Detective," I insisted. 3 different times, in 3 different places, always near Lily. This isn't a coincidence. She was watching her. He leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "A pattern of surveillance," he mused. "That does add a new dimension." He picked up the photos again, studying them closely. "We can try running these images through facial recognition software, but without clear facial features, the chances of a match are low. And we can cross-reference the locations and dates with known individuals who might have a motive. But that's a very wide net." "Please," I said. "Just look into it. It's more than we had before." He agreed to submit the images for analysis and revisit the case files with this new perspective. I left his office feeling a familiar mix of hope and dread. I had given them something concrete, something that suggested a deliberate act, not just a random tragedy. But would it be enough? Chapter 3. The waiting was agonizing. Every phone call sent my heart racing. Every unfamiliar car on my street made me jump. I felt a new layer of fear now. The realization that Lily's disappearance might not have been a random act, but something premeditated, something connected to a person who had been silently observing her life. Sophie noticed the change in me. I was more withdrawn, more consumed by my search. I hadn't told her about the woman in the photos. She was already so fragile. I didn't want to burden her with my new fears, my new tenuous thread of hope. Detective Ramirez called a few weeks later. My hand shook as I answered. "Eleanor," he said. His voice was serious. The facial recognition didn't yield any definitive matches. As we expected, the image quality is too poor. However, we did something else. My breath caught in my throat. Yes? We revisited the initial witness statements from the day Lily disappeared, he continued. Specifically, the descriptions of people seen near the park. One witness, an elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, who lived across the street from the park, mentioned seeing a woman fitting the description you provided. Tall, dark hair, dark coat, sitting on a bench near the playground for an unusually long time that morning. She said the woman seemed to be watching the children, but she didn't think much of it at the time. My blood ran cold. Mrs. Gable, did she get a better look at her? Not a clear one, he said. She wears glasses, and the woman was some distance away, but her description aligns with what's in your photos and video. More importantly, Mrs. Gable also mentioned something else, something that didn't seem relevant at the time, but now it might be. What was it? I urged. She said the woman had a distinctive accent. She couldn't place it exactly, but she remembers it being different, not local. An accent, that was something concrete, something that could potentially narrow the search. Did Mrs. Gable describe the accent at all? I asked. She said it sounded vaguely European, maybe Eastern European, Detective Ramirez replied. It's still not much to go on, but it adds another piece to the puzzle. He also mentioned they were re-interviewing other witnesses from that day, asking specifically about a woman with a distinctive accent. They were also cross-referencing missing persons databases, both nationally and internationally, looking for individuals who matched the description and had ties to Eastern Europe. The search had a new direction, a new focus. An unknown woman with an accent who had potentially been stalking my granddaughter. The fear was immense, but it was mixed with a grim determination. I finally felt like we were chasing something real, something tangible. I couldn't shake the image of the woman in the photos, always watching. Who was she? Why was she interested in Lily? Did she take her? Was Lily alive? The questions gnawed at me, day and night. I decided to expand my own search, using the limited information I had. I started researching Eastern European accents, trying to pinpoint where it might be from. I spent hours online, listening to audio clips, reading articles. It was a slow, painstaking process, adding another layer to my already consuming grief. I also started looking into online communities related to missing children, focusing on those with international connections. It was a heartbreaking world of shared pain and desperate hope. I posted about my search, about the unknown woman, the possible Eastern European accent, the pattern of surveillance I had uncovered. I included the blurry photos, hoping against hope that someone, somewhere, might recognize her. Responses came from around the world. Messages of support, shared stories of loss, and a few potential leads, though most turned out to be dead ends. People offered suggestions, shared resources, and provided comfort in the lonely darkness of my search. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Anya, who lived in a small village in Ukraine. She had seen my post and the blurry photos. Her message was hesitant, but intrigued. "Dear Eleanor," she wrote, "I saw your photos. The woman, she looks a little like someone who used to live near here. A woman named Irina. She moved away many years ago. Some said she went to America. Irina." The name echoed in my mind. She looks a little like. It wasn't a positive identification, but it was a lead, a name, a possible connection to Eastern Europe. I messaged Anya back immediately, asking for more information about Irina. Anya was helpful, but didn't know much. Irina had been a quiet woman, kept to herself. She had some kind of sadness about her, Anya recalled. She left the village suddenly, years ago, and no one had heard from her since. It wasn't much, but it was a thread. An incredibly thin thread, but a thread nonetheless. Irina. Could she be the woman in the photos? Could she be connected to Lily's disappearance? I forwarded Anya's information to Detective Ramirez. He added Irina's name to their list of potential persons of interest. They started looking into any immigration records, any connections Irina might have had to my town or the surrounding area. Chapter 4. The search for Irina proved difficult. Anya's memories were vague, and official records from that time and region were often incomplete or inaccessible. It was like chasing a ghost. In the meantime, my relationship with Sophie remained strained. My obsession with finding Lily, with uncovering the truth, felt like a constant reminder of her pain, a refusal to accept the bleak reality. She wanted to move forward, to find some semblance of peace, even if it was a fragile, grief-filled peace. My relentless searching felt, to her, like ripping open the wound again and again. "Mom," she said one evening, her voice tired and thin, "you need to let go. You're destroying yourself. She's gone. We have to accept that." "I can't accept that, Sophie," I said, my voice sharp. "Not yet. Not when there might be answers. Not when there was a woman watching her." "A blurry figure in old photos, Mom? It could be anyone," she cried, frustration and pain lacing her voice. "You're creating fantasies to cope." Her words stung, but I understood where they came from. Her grief was a heavy cloak she wore every day. She needed to believe in closure, even if it was the cruel closure of absence. My hope felt like a threat to her fragile peace. We argued. Tears were shed. The distance between us widened. It broke my heart, but I couldn't stop. I felt compelled to keep searching, driven by a force I couldn't explain. It was more than just a grandmother's love. It was a deep, unsettling intuition that Lily was somehow still connected to us, that the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. I continued my online research, delving deeper into international missing persons cases, adoption networks. Though Lily wasn't adopted, sometimes cases involved children taken and raised as someone else's, and anything related to Eastern European connections. It was a world of darkness and despair, filled with stories of abduction, trafficking, and stolen lives. It was terrifying, but I pushed through the fear, fueled by the desperate hope of finding Lily. One day, while searching through an online archive of old news articles from Ukraine, something caught my eye. An article from 20 years ago about a woman who had lost her daughter in a tragic accident. The details were sparse, but the name of the village matched the one Anya had mentioned. And the woman's name was Irina. I managed to find a grainy photo accompanying the article. It was old and faded, but even through the poor quality, I could see a resemblance to the woman in my photos. A younger version, etched with grief. I contacted Anya again, sending her the article. She confirmed it was the same Irina. She also remembered more details now. The tragic accident, the loss of Irina's young daughter. It had devastated Irina. She had never fully recovered. The pieces were starting to fit together in a terrifying way. A woman who had lost her own daughter years ago, potentially living in America, possibly with an Eastern European accent, appearing in the background of photos of my granddaughter. Was it a coincidence, or was it something far more sinister? Detective Ramirez was cautiously optimistic about the new information. They intensified their search for Irina, focusing on immigration records from that region around the time she left Ukraine. They also cross-referenced her name with any known aliases or connections to our area. Months passed. The leaves turned green again. Summer arrived. Still no definitive trace of Irina. It was like she had disappeared off the face of the earth. Then a breakthrough. Detective Ramirez called, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and caution. "Eleanor," he said, "we might have found something." Using a combination of old immigration data and cross-referencing with a national database of aliases, we found a potential match. A woman named Elena Petrov, who entered the U.S. 15 years ago from Ukraine. Her physical description, given upon entry, matches the general build and height of the woman in your photos. And she listed her previous name as Irina Volkov. Elena Petrov. It was her. The woman from the photos, the woman from the village, the woman who lost her daughter. The address listed for Elena Petrov was in a small town several states away. It was an old address, from when she first entered the country. They had lost track of her after that. "We're working with local law enforcement in that area," Detective Ramirez explained. "They're trying to locate her, see if she's still in the region or if she moved on." The news sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. After 5 years of searching, of dead ends and heartbreak, we had a name, a potential location. The woman who had been watching my granddaughter. Chapter 5. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and anticipation. The police were following the lead on Elena Petrov, trying to determine her current whereabouts. I felt a strange mix of hope that this would finally lead to answers and dread about what those answers might be. Sophie remained distant. I knew I needed to tell her about Elena Petrov, about the potential breakthrough, but I was afraid of how she would react, afraid of raising her hopes only to have them dashed again. Detective Ramirez called with an update. They had located a woman matching Elena Petrov's description, living under a different name, in a small, secluded cabin in the woods, not far from the town listed in her immigration records. They were approaching with caution, unsure of her state of mind or potential involvement. The waiting was unbearable. I sat by the phone, my hands clasped tightly, praying for news. Finally, the call came. Detective Ramirez's voice was weary, but held a note of resolution. "Eleanor," he said, "we found her. Elena Petrov, also known as Irina Volkov." My heart pounded. "And? What did you find?" "She was alone in the cabin," he said. "No signs of anyone else. No evidence of Lily. We questioned her. It was complicated." He explained that Elena was suffering from severe mental distress. The loss of her daughter years ago had never healed. She had developed a fixation on finding a child to fill the void, a child who reminded her of her lost little girl. She had seen Lily in the park that day, and something about her, her laughter, her pigtails, had triggered a powerful, distorted sense of recognition. She believed Lily was her daughter, Detective Ramirez said softly, that she had somehow been given back to her. My stomach clenched. "She took her?" "She admits to approaching her in the park," he said. "She says she convinced Lily to come with her. Lily was a trusting child, as you know." Tears streamed down my face. My sweet, trusting Lily. "Where is she, Detective?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "Where did she take her?" There was a long pause. "Eleanor," he said, his voice full of sorrow. "Elena says she says Lily is gone, that it was an accident, a terrible, tragic accident, not long after she took her. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Gone. Lily was gone. Not missing. Not possibly alive somewhere. Gone. The finality of it was a physical blow." Detective Ramirez explained the details, grim and heartbreaking. Elena's mental state was fragile. Her account sometimes disjointed, but the core of it seemed tragically clear. A moment of delusion, a terrible mistake, and the life of a little girl extinguished. Elena was taken into custody, facing charges. But for me, the legal consequences were secondary to the crushing weight of the news. Lily was gone, my beautiful granddaughter, stolen by a woman lost in her own grief, her own delusion. I finally told Sophie. It was the hardest conversation of my life. She collapsed in my arms, her sobs echoing the cry of my own broken heart. The fragile hope we had both unknowingly held on to, even in the deepest despair, was shattered. But amidst the shared tears, something shifted between us. The wall that had stood between us for 5 years crumbled. We held on to each other, two mothers united in an unbearable grief. The weeks that followed were a haze of sorrow and practicalities. The police investigation continued, confirming Elena's account. There was a quiet funeral, a small gathering of family and friends, a final goodbye to the little girl who had brought so much light into our lives. The truth was devastating, but it also brought a strange, somber form of closure. We knew what had happened. The uncertainty, the agonizing what if, was replaced by a painful certainty. Elena Petrov's trial was difficult. Her defense argued mental illness, the tragic consequences of unresolved grief and delusion. The prosecution painted a picture of abduction and negligence. The legal system worked through its processes, but for our family, the outcome felt secondary. Nothing could bring Lily back. After the trial, I visited Elena in the facility where she was being held. It was a difficult, painful meeting. She was a shell of a woman, lost in her own world of sorrow and guilt. I saw the echoes of her own lost daughter in her eyes, the pain that had festered and warped into this terrible act. I didn't feel forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I felt a profound sadness for the tragedy of her life, a life broken by loss, leading to the breaking of ours. The chest in the attic, the photos and videos on my computer, they were no longer just reminders of what was lost, but also testaments to the love we had for Lily, the joy she brought us, the brief but brilliant light of her life. The search for the woman in the frame had led us to a terrible truth, a truth that brought immense pain, but also a sense of peace that only certainty can bring. The flickering image in the accidental video had been more than just a random capture. It had been the first visible thread of a tragic story waiting to be unraveled. 5 years of searching, fueled by a grandmother's love and a flicker of intuition. 5 years of living with a gaping wound. Finding the truth didn't heal the wound, but it allowed us to finally begin the slow, painful process of mourning, of remembering Lily not as a missing child, but as the vibrant, loving little girl she was. And in the quiet moments, I could still hear her laughter, see her gap-toothed smile, a precious memory etched forever in my heart, a flicker of light that even the deepest darkness could not extinguish.